Welcome to Category Visionaries, the show dedicated to exploring exciting visions for the future from the founders who are on the front lines building it. In each episode, we'll speak with a visionary founder who's building a new category or reimagining an existing one. We'll learn about the problem they solve, how their technology works, and unpack their vision for the future. I'm your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines Media. Now let's dive right into today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Category Visionaries. Today we're speaking with Bryan Kester, CEO of SiteWire, a construction technology company that's raised $3.2 million in funding. Bryan, what's going on?
Hey Brett, great to be here. Let's see what's going on today. Beyond talking to you, just waiting anxiously for some more rain to fall here in the Eastern Bay Area.
Amazing. So I want to ask you some questions about your past. So, I bring on a lot of founders where this is their first company, maybe their second company. I know you go way back in Silicon Valley. You've been here for a very long time. You've been doing this for a very long time. So let's go ahead and go back to the mid-90s. Talk to us about what you're up to then.
Yeah, well, actually, mid-90s, I had gotten out of school, had moved to San Francisco, and, there weren't a whole lot of options in the technology industry. I studied computer science and economics, undergrad. And then I got recruited by a management consulting firm. So I did that for a couple of years. But then if you were in a computer science lab in the 90s, you kind of knew that the internet was pending and you were just looking for signs for it. So a friend of mine was working kind of on the San Francisco Wall Street level at a trading firm and had worked on the Netscape IPO in 96. And we all met up at a bar afterwards and he's like, Netscape's out the door. And that was kind of our signal that it's go time. So I quickly found an opportunity with a group that actually ran around and acquired all the country's web development shops. And we became, the first national internet consulting company and built a lot of the first gen e-commerce, web brochure sites, all that stuff. So yeah, I've been doing that for a while. And then because of that, I got attracted into VC, a couple of venture capital firms that I met, through doing the National Internet Consulting Agency, just wanted both, people that could help them as associates, but also help their portfolio companies figure out how to build things because no one knew how to really develop software on the web. Because, prior to the internet, everything was a desktop software world. You put things on CDs and, even Oracle still has this group called manufacturing and distribution, that prints out CDs and stuff. And so it's a really huge shift in the world. So I got a front row seat to it and got to work within a venture capital firm and learn that business. And then, after that, in the early to mid 2000s, I just went operational and decided to be on the entrepreneurial side of the fence.
What was the hardest part about making that transition back to being operational?
I'd just say that, my brain loves being engaged with multiple things at once, but also at the same time, I do really enjoy maniacal focus. But flipping from a world where I was engaged with all these different business ideas in VC, you see potentially hundreds of ideas a week, you're kind of working through all of them. That sort of brain candy, that stimulation. I missed that when I went operational, but then I got fulfilled by the ability to maniacally focus on something and actually, see it through, whether it was a short-term objective or a long-term objective. So, but that was a challenge, just switching from being somebody with a consulting VC, macro mindset into becoming really, really deep in a domain and becoming that expert in driving the company, forward in that domain. And in a lot of cases, I know you talk about category creation a lot, but also being able to see what it's like to kind of get into the weeds of something and build a category from scratch around a disruption or novel way of doing things.
What was the time period like in, 2000, 2001 when the bubble burst? Can you just take us back and articulate how painful was that time period for tech?
Oh, Christ. The best thing I could say is that if you were in your 20s, and there were a lot of people in their 20s in San Francisco, as it's always been, first of all, everybody got fired. I mean, it was like the Great Depression. So everyone lost their jobs. And if you wandered outside your apartment and you were pretty much anywhere in San Francisco, you'd see people at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning at the local, pub, so to speak, just getting drunk and spending whatever their meager winnings were from options that had been able to liquidate before everything melted down or the big bonuses they got when the heyday time was going. And, it was a whole cycle of people basically everybody being out of work, even including me for a short spell. The firm that I was with ran into some trouble and asked me to take a leave for 6 months. And so I just took a vacation, tried to figure out and got prepared to kind of, what's next. But same little thing that's actually happened a couple times now, which is you have a wave of people, come into the Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, a little bit of a gold rush, the bottom falls out from beneath you. And then the hardy ones stay and stay with it. And then the ones that really just keen for the quick hit, like go back from wherever they came, East Coast, other countries, et cetera. And I think there's a little bit of the same thing going on now, although the pandemic made it kind of a different thing. And now the idea of retreat is really just about taking your tech skills, if you want to stay in the industry, and, taking them elsewhere. You see, obviously we now have like Austin, Boston's always been a tech center, but you see other places, Miami, a few others that pop up with concentrations of tech people who've, retreated. But yeah, that's what it was like. It was kind of like a nuclear weapon hit economically, and people just didn't have jobs for a really long time. So, I mean, by comparison, post GFC and also what's going on right now are fairly lightweight relative to the dot-com burst, because the wholesale unemployment today, it's not nearly as visible as it was then. And it's weird. It really didn't get a lot of attention because I just don't think we had a lot of, despite the internet being new and novel and there being a lot of outlets, there just wasn't the 24/7 prime time coverage of everything in tech that there is today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's switch gears and let's talk about everything that you're building today. So at a very high level, I know I introduced the company as a construction technology company. How would you articulate what the company does to those of us who are not in the construction industry?
Yeah, actually, at a high level, what we do is really simple. So we work in this sector called construction finance, which is just a fancy way of saying that as buildings are getting built, there's generally a loan behind them, funding and financing everything. And the way that construction loans work, whether you're building a skyscraper or doing a fix and flip that you see on Home and Garden TV, is that you'll get a construction loan, let's just say for $1 million. And part of that money is to acquire the property or the building that you want to redevelop, tear down and build something new, or whatever you're going to do with that property. The other part of the loan that is meant for the actual construction work, you don't get that loan money until you've done the work or achieved certain milestones in the project. In residential home building, which is what we concentrate on, what that means is that you could be a home flipper or somebody building, 3 to 7 homes in a neighborhood, and you have to prove to the lender that you've spent $500,000 on construction costs before the money from your loan will reimburse you for that. So what traditionally happened is the lender would send an inspector out to your job site, would take 3 to 7 days, and you'd be waiting, a week or 2 or 3 in some cases for $500,000 or $1 million to come your way after the work's been proven, the reports have been filed, et cetera. So needless to say, if you're a small scale home builder and don't have deep reserves of cash, that's pretty painful because you have a lot of bills stacking up from your electrician, your general contractor, and you can just kind of go down the list. So what we do is we actually automate that inspection process and make it remote and virtual. So we have a mobile app that people who are building homes use to document their work progress and ask for money. And then pretty quickly, a remote lender, along with some service personnel that we have who are general contractors, will review the money request and then authorize and get the money out the door to you today. So we take what normally is a 1 to 3 week process of asking and getting reimbursed for anywhere from $50,000 to $1 million and turn it down into something that takes like 2 hours.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
What was it about this problem that made you want to go all in on it? But if you had anything else you wanted to add, feel free to add it as well.
Yeah. And so what got me interested in this is that I grew up in Sacramento in a kind of a home building family. I had a real estate agent mother. And then my sister, when she graduated high school, actually turned down college. She was a great student, but decided to become a home flipper. And so I was kind of always around homes and kind of home building. And then even my dad, when he retired from the airlines, became kind of amateur and then professional general contractor working with them and flipping homes and building new ones. So that's kind of where my family's from. And then in my travels on the tech side, my last company got acquired by Autodesk. And for folks that aren't familiar with Autodesk, they're the dominant provider of architectural software and about 200 other things. And they've really, while I was there, gotten heavy focus on construction and trying to really own a lot of project management tools to complement their architecture tools in the commercial construction world. So I got re-exposed to that end of construction. I already had a background in residential. I got re-exposed to commercial. And I kind of came out of there thinking, I should just do something in residential to help this country build homes faster. So then I went and built my own home. And the one thing you'll learn in home building, whether you're doing a renovation or building something from scratch, is there's no magic to it. If you pay people every week, they come back to your job site on Monday and Tuesday versus going somewhere else. Cash flow is pretty much everything. Even when building my own house, I would take out stacks of as much money as you can take out of the bank, basically up to $10,000 to just distribute cash like directly to my GCs, subcontractors. And so through that process, I thought there's got to be a way we can digitize this. And that's basically what SiteWire is. It's a way to check on work and get people paid really quickly, essentially via a mobile app and also some web software, and just keep cash flowing constantly to a job site. Because if you can do that, the odds of your project finishing on time and somewhere around budget they go up dramatically. I mean, statistically, it's probably like 6x from what we've seen.
Wow, that's insane. Is the category like construction lending, or how would you define?
Well, we're actually an odd bird. So we're creating something new. There are construction finance platforms that we actually compete with that will help a lender organize all their loans and figure out how much money still needs to be dispersed against that loan. And then they in turn hire out inspection companies that send guys out in the field. And there's actually systems integration sometimes between the construction finance software and the on-site inspection company that sends kind of like freelancers out across all over the country to do these reports. We fused them both into one new thing where you can do all your construction finance disbursement management in our cloud. And at the other end of it, we have this field mobile application that's really resilient and bulletproof, and you can be used by anybody that doesn't even speak English to ask for money and show off all the work they're doing at a job site. So the unique thing we've done that creates a new offering, and it's very disruptive, is we've combined financial progress tracking on a construction job site and married it with the visual tracking. So you can look at November 15th and say, okay, we've dispersed $250,000 and all that work went into these 25 videos, and you can see the progress and line them up one to one. Whereas in the normal world today, if you just said, what did this thing look like at month 2 once we had spent $250,000, you wouldn't have a clean answer. You'd be going through Dropboxes and emails and folders, trying to pull together inspection reports and marry them to like what you're looking at in a spreadsheet, try to make sense of the whole thing.
What's been the reception from the industry? Is the industry generally open to new categories, new ideas like this? Has it been difficult to get adoption? What's that been like for you?
No, it's not easy. So the 2 least technology adopted industries in the planet, and this is behind even healthcare and sectors of defense that are antiquated, are real estate and construction. And our company basically has one leg in both. And so it's been a long slog to get here. It's been a little bit of a passion play. Also, I happen to have a built-in customer. A friend of mine started one and runs a lender that became our first customer. So I got to learn and get paid right out of the gates with it. But this industry just does not really embrace disruption. Everything in real estate is very, very transactional. And I think anybody that's bought a home can see this. When you're going to buy a home, there's about 6 or 7 people with their hand in that transaction, right? You've got a mortgage broker, you've got the mortgage originator. Sometimes that mortgage gets sold to, the government or to a Wall Street person. You've got home appraisers, you have a home inspector, and you have a real estate agent. Getting all those people to coalesce around a different way of doing things is an absolute nightmare. And it's the same thing on what are called business purpose mortgages or construction loans. So you have mortgage brokers, you've got Wall Street people buying these loans in a lot of cases. I'm actually really juicing the market right now. And just a panoply of people that have kind of their hand in the pot and the hand in the transaction. And the whole industry is very transactional. Everybody in real estate's just trying to close a deal. And what that creates is a whole industry of people that really aren't focused on efficiency or business processes. And so fundamentally, most all B2B software is about automating a business process. And historically, everybody that I work with it's a giant pile and a mountain of spreadsheets and emails and PDFs and Dropbox folders. And they find a way to make it work, mainly by hiring low-cost back office employees to just make it all happen. So a lot of times, short answer to your question is that we are sometimes outside of the loan, what's called a loan origination system, like the way that someone would apply for a loan and you would measure the risk on it and then generate the loan. Outside of that loan origination system, we're often the first other piece of technology that shows up, other than spreadsheets and email. So it's a non-insignificant hurdle. And also for us, we disrupt something that's been going on for hundreds of years, which is some person going and physically checking on a job site. And so the initial response to what we're doing was, you're crazy. why would you pull a person out of visiting a job site? And there's a lot of reasons why you would do it, from an expertise level, speed, and technology's improved and phones can capture a lot now, but it sounds crazy to people. And I joke about this, but it's true. I mean, I spent a good part of my early career trying to convince people that you could trust your credit card to the internet. And this is almost fundamentally the same kind of pitch, like, hey, we should pull a field inspector out of this process and make it go 10 times faster. And people just look at you like you're crazy. But like a lot of adoption things, you get those early adopters that want to try something new, and you just keep building on top of that.
When it comes to marketing, how do you find the early adopters? What I've always found is as frustrating is they don't identify themselves necessarily. So like, how do you know that someone's going to be an early adopter? Like, where do you prioritize marketing spend and marketing effort?
In this business, we're trying to have to invent a lot of marketing stuff. We're still sort of struggling a little bit with like what I would call like a repeatable digital go-to-market. But getting back to what I mentioned earlier, this whole industry is driven by relationships and trust. And so what we've had to do is get on the ground, boots on the ground, go to a lot of conferences, make friends. It's literally about making friends and establishing a relationship that you're not a shark. You're not there to screw somebody over. You're a trustworthy, high integrity individual. And then the software and the product behind you and the service that you offer by extension is also trustworthy. And then also just being, value focused. A lot of folks, particularly in our industry, have never had a salesperson come along and be consultative and really focused on problems versus trying to ram something down their throats. So those two things in our space have been kind of, an innovation for folks, and it gets them to say, okay, tell me more. And then of course, once you get somebody to be open and receptive, you've got something valuable. It's, for us, it's been a pretty slam dunk kind of sale, but just getting them to like open their minds and be willing to shake your hand and double click and want to lean into what we have to offer is the challenge. So we just go out there and try to make friends. I have a couple people that are almost airborne all the time, just making friends at conferences. And that's our go-to-market vector, just relationship building and trust building. And then that's created word of mouth and network effects for us.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their U.S. and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
Let's talk a little bit about money and fundraising specifically. So from our pre-interview, I know you're a bootstrap guy. It sounds like you didn't start off that way, but you became one. Talk to us about how you think about building early stage startups.
Well, everyone calls it product market fit now. What you're really looking for is you're trying not to dilute the company, dilute your future, and raise too much capital until you've got a model, a business model, and a situation where people are coming to you and asking you to do things or wanting to learn more. So getting to that product market fit level, I think there's multiple definitions people have about what that means. But for me, it's just when people are knocking on your door, then it's time to raise money. So for us, that's been a multi-year process. For other companies, that could be a year or two. But that's the way I think about it, is like, don't raise money until you really need it and you really have something you want to accelerate. The corollary to that is that I've worked on a couple deep tech companies. And if you're building like a deep tech company, like out of the gates, you have to have something super capital intensive like AI, or my last company was a Internet of Things company that was trying to just do really massive transaction processing. Sometimes you just need to pre-fund things. You just can't avoid raising money. But my general thing's been to try and vet the business, or at least vet the demand, way before you even think about talking to an institutional investor. Because if you don't vet demand before institutional money comes in and those expectations ratchet up, you're going to get in trouble no matter what. And then the other thing too is that the ZERP environment, like the last 10 to 15 years, created this weird chase for magically high valuations and unicorns. And I consult with and invest in a few startups, and I try to tell everybody that'll listen, like, valuation is a magic number. It's a magic number that makes you whole, makes the investor whole, and also keeps your options open down the road for doing different things. So like I have a couple competitors right now that have raised 270, 300 million, literally 100 times what we've raised. And they're in valuations right now where there's no escape. And the only solution is to start recapping, reorganizing, pivoting the company, which in that case is like 100+ person company. And so the valuation's now an albatross. So that's my mentality is, be thoughtful and strategic about when you bring capital in. Also, a lot of people celebrate getting funding. For me, it's not a celebration. It's like, okay, we're on to phase 2 or 3 here. And the work's really, got to ratchet up even more than what you were already doing. So I mean, hopefully that kind of answers your question a little bit, but I just try to be a lot more thoughtful about fundraising. I don't think of it as this, it's definitely not a goal. It's an enabler to get you to where you want to be. And you have to be careful about when you bring it in and who you bring it from.
What would be some other areas that you maybe have contrarian views? And that's contrarian, I would say, maybe in Silicon Valley. I think in wider business circles, it seems to be, there's a trend and a movement towards bootstrapping. If I think about, being here in San Francisco or Silicon Valley, I think that's still somewhat contrarian. What else do you have that would go against what is common advice or beliefs?
Yeah, the move fast and break things idea is kind of, I mean, you want to be disruptive and you want to be sure it's great to be a band of pirates, but you also kind of need to be really aware of like what kind of environment you're operating in and whether you fit that market. In our space, if I didn't think that I could actually become buddies with a lot of our customers and hang out with them for a beer and like enjoy hearing stories about their businesses and what they do, it wouldn't be a fit. And I think a lot of people come out of, I like to pick on Stanford because I went to the other school here in the Bay Area. Coming out of Stanford and being like, okay, I got to find a CTO and I got to find a problem to solve that may not be in a domain that has any value to you. I think there's a fair number of folks that are both encouraged by the industry as well as investors and everybody else to go after things that don't really resonate with their personal being or fiber. And I think that's a huge mistake because you're talking about something that you have to be prepared to run one of these things out for 7 years, I think at a minimum, and probably well over a decade if you're being realistic with yourself. And I don't think that mentality is represented anywhere in TechCrunch or any publication today that you're going to read. The whole industry has got a let's move fast, let's break things. This guy just made $1 billion. Being a billionaire is the objective. We're having unicorns objective. I just think we're focused on all the wrong things. I mean, it needs to be kind of, for me, I think ingredients are an MBA-like mentality, but with less risk aversion and more thinking about how to like truly disrupt something and not just like digitize some workflow. And I just don't think all those things are there. The other thing that's bugging me about the technology industry the last 10 to 15 years is that the overall level of innovation is extremely low. I mean, I haven't gotten excited about anything since the AI is blowing me away right now. That's the first major thing that I can think of since even the iPhone I thought was a joke because I'd seen the Palm Pilot and other attempts at that 10 years prior. I mean, I just feel like we've gotten away from fundamental innovation. And I don't know that that's a commonly held view across the technology industry right now. The industry itself's become a little too overrun with a lot of finance people and kind of Wall Street types versus like technologists or people who really like fundamentally care about innovation.
I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you on all of that. Now, final question for you. Let's zoom out 3 to 5 years into the future. What's the big picture vision here that you're building?
Yeah, we're trying to build something, our noble goal, and we really do believe in this, is that look, everybody who's been pick somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even, and possibly even their 60s. I mean, nobody can get a home right now. I mean, there's a variety of reasons for that, but the fundamental reason is the supply is behind. And the supply is behind because we have this patchwork of junky permitting laws and regulations and zoning ordinances across the country and the state. And the Bay Area is probably the worst example. There's 9 counties here, and in every county, you've got the little city that cares about its thing versus the city next door cares about something different. And it's just brought home building to a halt. So we look at our mission as if we can help the people that are building homes and also refreshing inventory, which is what fix and flippers do. If we can help them get more inventory on the market, we can help put a dent in the housing problem that I think is just going to continue to persist until there's a turnover from the baby boomers and them leaving that inventory open and available for other folks to move into. But yeah, so our vision is to keep building something out that brings more trust into the industry between people who are building homes and the lenders and people on the institutional side, like Wall Street, don't really trust people in construction. And because of that, the people in construction, think everybody that's on the financing side just doesn't understand like what they're going through every day. And so we're trying to bring those two worlds together. And that's kind of fuzzy, but in our industry, that's going to be a major accomplishment because we're really bringing two industries together. We're bringing construction folks together with finance folks, and they got into their jobs for different reasons. Finance folks get into finance to be wealthy, and construction people get into to be wealthy, but they also get into to be wealthy by working outside with their hands and actually staying away from technology. So the more that we can use technology to bring the two sides together, like that's our goal with an end output of being able to hopefully increase the country's production of homes.
I love the vision and I love the mission. I really have loved this conversation. Before we wrap here, if there's any founders that are listening in and want to follow along with you as you build and execute on this vision, where should we send them?
Yeah, we have a little website for when I'm on podcasts or doing things like this called, it's at GetSiteWire.com, SiteWire. And if you do that, you're basically going to get on our sort of closed, little more intimate like mailing list for newsletters. But also I keep a close eye on that just to see who's coming in and adding them to kind of different things that we're sharing. And then if for some reason you want to get a hold of me directly for whatever reason, I'm fairly accessible through LinkedIn, although it's getting a little messy, but I try to go through there once every week or every 2 weeks and kind of go through all the invitations and outreach I've seen and talk to people there.
Amazing. I love it. Bryan, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely, Brett. No, I've really enjoyed this. And thanks to everybody that's listening for taking the time as well.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.